A very warm good evening to all the history enthusiasts and also a very happy Buddha Purnima. Today we have gathered on this virtual gathering to celebrate the birth of the light of the world, Tathagat Gautam Buddha. And on this very august occasion, we have our first lecture of the Tathagat series, Origin and Evolution of Stupa in the Indian Context, with reference to literary and archaeological evidences. Our esteemed resource person for today is Dr. Vinay Kumar, Assistant Professor, Department of Ancient Indian History, Culture and Archaeology, Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi. Sir, I welcome you on behalf of the entire core committee of the history enthusiast, of which you are also a very honorable member. And I also welcome all the audience members who are joining us through this lecture, all the core committee members who have helped in setting up this lecture and this series. And now, without any further ado, I take this opportunity to introduce our resource person, Dr. Vinay Kumar. Uh, completed his PhD, MA, both in Ancient Indian History, Culture and Archaeology, postgraduate diploma in Archaeology from Institute of Archaeology, Archaeological Survey of India. Presently, he is working as an assistant professor in the Department of Ancient Indian History, Culture and Archaeology, Banaras Hindu University, Varanasi. Prior to this, he has worked as assistant professor at Indira Gandhi National Tribal University, Amarkantak, that is in Madhya Pradesh. He has worked as consultant and assistant archaeologist in ASI and also as a research scholar in Indira Gandhi National Center for the Arts and Indian Archaeological Society, New Delhi. His areas of specialization include field archaeology, art history, and heritage management. Dr. Kumar is recipient of gold medal by former Honorable President of India for being university topper. He has been awarded Junior and Senior Research Fellowship by University Grants Commission and also National Museum of Korea 2014 and 2016 Museum Network Fellowship by the Government of South Korea. He has been awarded Study and Research Grant by the Nehru Trust for the Indian collections at the Victoria and Albert Museum to undertake project on ethno-archaeological perspectives on megaliths of Pathar. He has participated and supervised many archaeological excavations. To name a few, excavations at Lahore Dev, Uttar Pradesh, Tirana, Haryana, Baror, Rajasthan, Hansi, Haryana, Banpura in Madhya Pradesh, uh, etc. He has conducted archaeological excavation at the sites of Matigaon, in Chandoli as a director in field season 2019 to 2022. He has undertaken many research projects and their outcomes have been presented in many international and national seminars, workshops, and conferences. Dr. Kumar has worked with many international and national scholars and has published more than 45 research papers in many national and international journals. He has authored the book titled West Asian and Hellenistic Elements in Indian Art, uh, Mani Shushma, Archaeology and Heritage, Early Harappan Culture of Kot Diji, Sothi Complex, Indian Art, Archaeology and Culture, felicitating a legendary archaeologist, Professor B.B. Lal, Puramimamsa and Puratatva Vaibhav. He is a life member of many national and international committees and societies, including Indian Archaeological Society, New Delhi, International Association for Asian Heritage, Colombo, Society of South Asian Archaeology, SOSA, Pune, Museum Association of India, Indian Art History Congress, Indian Society for Greek and Roman Studies, and so on. Uh, he is he has organized 8 international and 9 national level conferences. Dr. Kumar is well versed in Persian, German, Sanskrit, Oriya, Bangla, and Maithili languages. He is a scholar of multi talented and multifaceted achievements. And it is an honor to have you, sir, on our platform today, not only as a resource person, but as a senior advisory member of the History Enthusiasts family. And now I request Dr. Vinay Kumar, sir, to kindly begin his lecture.
Thank you, Manaliji, for giving my this such a elaborate introduction. And first of all, I am very much thankful to this platform, History Enthusiast. and whose I'm also a member, which Banalaji already told me that. And I am very much thankful to Manaliji, Nidhi ji, as well as our mentor and all one of the most eminent and senior person of this history enthusiast group, this Nandan Sastri sir, along with Ravi Korsetter sir, and so many other stalwarts who are engaged with this particular history enthusiast group. So today I will be talking about the topic which you can see, origin and evolution of the stupa in Indian context with reference to the literary as well as the archaeological evidence. So when we talk about the evolution of the stupa or the origin of the stupa in Indian context, we know that the study in the evolution of this Indian architectural edifice is basically, which is the Buddhist architecture, has attracted the fascination of the scholars from throughout the world. And the earliest man-made structural dwellings in the country that we know, they are basically for the residential structure, which was meant mainly for the habitation. Secular as well as some secular structures are also reported from the early phase of the proto-historic period. And the religious buildings which came into existence with the emergence of the different religions in the history of the Indian civilization, the Buddhism, which besides being one of the oldest religion has been a way of life and as a socio-cultural system. And a variety of the architecture was conceived, patronized, as well as constructed by the Buddhists throughout the length and breadth of the country, or not only in the country, throughout the whole world, which we can say. And of these, the stupa architecture occupies a very important place or the role. And the stupa architecture in its origin, evolution, and the structural arrangement remains an exciting architectural phenomena. And the reasons very aptly, which has been quoted by some of the scholars regarding the importance of this particular structure or the architecture, is that probably in no other religion except the Buddhism, a particular structure has been recommended by its founder either for the worship or for commemoration or as a means of salvation. So it is the stupa that has been commanded by the Tathagata himself, and it is therefore not only religious but it symbolizes the presence of the Lord throughout without any icon. But it creates some sense of reverence and fear in the minds of the people, and the similar reactions has been found in the Brahminical practices of the idol worship. But at the same time, it avoids all the formal ritualistic performances of the latter. So the word stupa, when we talk about this particular word, when we talk about this word stupa has been mentioned in the Rigved and Atharvaved as well as the Vasanai Samhita, Taittiriya Samhita, and in the Montreal Williams Sanskrit Dictionary, which says that it is a top or the top of the hair, the upper part of the head, crest or the top summit, a heap or the pile of the earth or bricks, etc. So it is a solid mound or tumulus generally erected over a deposit of the bodily remains, which you can see in the slides. This is the example of the stupa number 3 of famous Vadati site of Sanchi. So when we talk about the meaning of this particular term of stupa, so it has got different meanings in different languages. In Sanskrit, it means to heap or the pile up, or the bunch of the wool, or the raised lock of the hair, or the forepart of the head. And stupa means sometime to praise or to worship. And it also sometimes denotes about the tree's stem. And when we talk about the various synonyms of this particular word stupa, in Sanskrit it is Chaitya or the Dhatu Garb. In Tibet or the Ladakh it is known as Chorten. In Sinhalese text it is known as Dagaba. In English we generally find the term Top for stupa. In Burmese we call it pagoda, or you can say rather in many Southeast Asian countries use this term of pagoda for the stupa. In Thai or the Thailand it is known as Chedi. In Indonesia and Malaysia it is Chandi. In Cambodia it is called Chedai. In Chinese it is known as Ta. In Korea it is Tap. In Vietnam it is Thap. And in Japan it is Sotoba. In Myanmar it is called Jedi. So there are various terms for this particular structure, that is the stupa. And for the first time, this word stupa was introduced into English by Elphinstone in his account of the tomb of the Manikayala in the Rawalpindi district in the year 1839. So for the first time, it was Elphinstone who used this term "tope" for the stupa in his writings. So according to him, tope is an expression used for a mound or the barrow as far as west of the Peshawar, which has been reported in his accounts. So the stupa profile is extremely varied, which depends on the epoch and the country, but it is always recognizable as if it has conjured within itself through all its transformation something permanent which characterizes it and the object of worship as well as the veneration, center of attraction of the pious people, Solomon of the familiar. It carries within itself a part of the history and the Buddhist doctrine. It is a sign and the set of the signs. So the stupa is so linked to the Buddhist life that they were not content to erect monuments alone. So sculptors, they represented them on stones, and we find them profusely represented on the panels on the stupa monuments itself, on the railing balustrade surrounding it, on the cave walls, on the stupa monuments, on the structural monolith made up of the varied materials, and from the which were made from the clay, with the wood, the ivory, metals, terracotta. The study material is abundant for the study of this particular stupa architecture. And when we talk about the study of the Mahavastu, Divyavadan, as well as the Kriya Sangraha Sutra, they have the help to evolve the chronology of this particular structure of the stupa from 2nd century BC to the 1st century AD or CE. So it thus enables us to understand our knowledge of the indispensable monument of the Buddhism. So according to M. Sivaram Murthy, stupa is regarded as a monument for veneration. But as a stupa seems to be associated with the votive as well as the commemorative stupa, I will be talking about the different types of the stupa, and sometimes for the offering purposes also, that is the votive stupa. The stupa was related to the ritualistic as well as the commemorative, with the sectarian affiliation with the school of philosophical thoughts, which was born by the aspect of the socio-economic life of the Buddhist people. And when we talk about the Buddhist text like the Avadan Shatak, that is the Mahavadan, as well as the Stupa Vadan. So all these texts, they mention about the commemorative aspect of the stupa, and even sometimes the Jain literatures like the Raya Pasenia. This is a Jain text which tells us about the stupa, and it tells that the stupa refers to probably in the later period due to the deep desire of the common mass to worship the Lord for the sake of the salvation. And the stupa acquired its votive character as well as the early stupas, they were devoid of the art. And since the Asoka's time, when we talk about the modern period, these stupa architecture acquired the prominence in the socio-cultural life of the country, and this art began to develop around the stupa structure. So, according to Alexander Cunningham, who is considered to be the father for the establishment of Archaeological Survey of India, and other scholars like Messe as well as the Fouché, they are of the opinion that the remains of the stupa, which were found at the Sanchi, they can be categorized into various categories, which I will be talking later on. So when we talk about the history of the stupa architecture, this particular stupa is derived from a pre-Buddhist burial mound. This particular structure, and indeed, this custom was not peculiar to the India alone, and it was only an adaptation of the whole world or the worldwide practice of burying the dead under the tumulus, or we call the cairn. During the Middle Bronze Age, that is around 2000 BCE to 1000 BCE, we begin to see the appearance of the tumuli, which are the burial mounds where the dead, usually of the upper class, they are entombed with the gifts of the weapon as well as the jewelry. So I'm talking about the history of the stupa. So we have the evidence of this stupa architecture in the Indus Valley civilization, and here we can find out a Sararat Chakra Siddhi, which which has been found in the excavations at Dholavira. You can see in the slide here. And similarly, the Stupa Mount at Mohenjo-daro, which was reported by Fogel, you can see here, this is the image of the Stupa Mount, which has been found from the site of Mohenjo-daro. And this is the famous Stupa of Sanghol in Punjab. And here, this Stupa was excavated, and this is the Sam Chaturasya Chakra Chitti pattern of the Stupa, and it belonged to the Kushan period. And we have encountered the similar kind of a structure in the extreme south India, that is at the site of Nagarjuni Konda. And here also we can see the Sararat Chakra Siddhi pattern of the stupa. This is the plan of the Maha Stupa or the Chaitya. And here, this is the stupa of the Jain pantheon. You can see here. The plan of this Jain stupa has been rebuilt from the Kankali Tila of the Mathura. And here, when we talk about the protoform of the stupa from the megalithic tumulus or the cane circle, so various scholars have the different opinions about the origin of this particular structure. And because we have the resemblance of the megalithic burial tombs with the stupa, and the such type of the evidences have been found from the areas of Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Karnataka, Andhra Pradesh, Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, and Uttar Pradesh, as well as in Rajasthan. And a type of the megalithic burial, that is the Kundan Kudaikal, that is the handless umbrella stone or the hood stone, and also with the handles, they are found at the site of Kerala. Is circular covering slab resting on the natural ground. So you can see here, this is the Kundan Kudaikal, and the tomb of the Celtic princess of the 4th as well as the 5th century CE. Here we come across similar kind of a structure which is considered to be the stupa. So this is the umbrella stone, you can see here, or mushroom cap stone from the South India, dating around 1000 BCE. And the origin of the stupa from the Vedic Chitti. So I told you in the beginning that we have got the reference of this particular term of stupa in our Vedic text or the ancient text of the Rig Veda, as well as the later texts of the this Atharva Veda, Vasanai Samhita, as well as the Taittiriya Samhita. So all these texts mention about this particular term of stupa. So when we talk about the origin of the stupa from the Vedic Siddhi or the stupa as we mentioned in the Vedic literature, so this word occurs in the Rig Veda or the Atharva Veda, Taittiriya Samhita, Vasani Samhita, as well as the Satpat Brahmana. So this word stupa is said to have been derived from the Sanskrit root stu, which means to worship or to praise, and loosely it has been translated as a knot or the top of the hair. And in Rigved text, the stupa means tree's stem, and in other meaning is to heap or to pile up. In Rigved, we find this hymn or this particular mantra where we can know about the existence of this particular stupa. And Samsan has also been mentioned as a burial mound repeatedly in the Atharva Veda as well as in later Samhitas. And in the Satpat Brahman, a four-corner mound which is facing the southeast on the ground, inclined to the north, is prescribed for the ashes of the dead. So this particular narration has been mentioned in the Satpat Brahman, and in the Rig Veda also it this refers about a kind of the stupa, that is the Mrinmaya Grih, which means a grave made up of the earth, and the word Grih means here the substantial structure. So in both Rig Veda as well as in Atharva Veda, a pillar is set up on the grave after the earth is piled up. So that has become the Yupa later on. I will be telling about this one. So in Rig Veda, the collection of the flames of the fire has also been styled as a stupa. This is mentioned in the Rig Veda, and it seems that the stupa has its origin from an altar, or that is the siti, or a tumulus piled at the site of the funeral pyre as some kind of the memorite with a tree or a wooden post planted in its center. That is the Chaitya bricks as well as the post as the Chaitya yup. So in Mahavans, that is the Buddhist text, it has mentioned that the site of the stupa, a pillar was erected and it was known as yup. That we know in the Buddhist text. So it may be more appropriate to regard this yup as a prototype of the Buddhist stone pillar. So you can see here, this is the Vedic Chitti and this is the Chaitya Yuga, which I have already talked about. And sometime in place of this Chaitya Yuga, we find the Chaitya Briksh. So you can see here, these all are the developmental stage to show about this emergence of the Chaitya, or the which later on, or at the end of the structure of this stupa architecture, it became the Kshatriyasti, which I will be talking about. So coming to the origin of the Chaitya from the Vedic Chitya, again, this has the reference in the Rig Veda that Chaitya is one of the synonym of the stupa in the Rig Veda, and the worship of the Chaitya was in vogue long before the epoch of the Buddha. So it was not, generally it is accepted that after the Lord Buddha, or after the Tathagat, after his Mahaparinirvan, we are getting the emergence of the stupa architecture in the Buddhist religion, but that is not the case, because I'm trying to show you, or I'm trying to tell you about this origin of this stupa structure prior to the emergence of the Buddhism. So this verses of the Chaitya was in vogue long before the epoch of the Buddha. So this term was not only denoting the architecture, but to sacred trees, memorial stones, images, etc. So anything which is worshipped is called Chaitya, that is the Chaitya Yuga, Chaitya Briksh, Chaitya Prasad, as well as the Chatush Chaitya. So these all terms are mentioned in our ancient text. And the Chatush Chaitya, which is situated at the terminal of the four streets, that is also mentioned in our text. And the Chaitya was a popular cult even during the time of the Buddha. And according to the Digha Nikaya of this Buddhist religion, this text, this Lord Buddha or the Tathagat, he visited the Udaina, Gautama, as well as the Stambhaka Chaitya. And he also lived at the Anand Chaitya in the Bhojanagraha. And the word Chaitya is probably derived from the word Chitya, the word which is mainly occurring in the older Samhitas. So the fifth kand of the Taittiriya Samhita says that the following the lines about the Chaitya, Rupani Sharvani Rupani Agnau Chitte Krityante Tasmat Itagneh Chitasyana. So it says about the Agni Chaitya or the Chitya to which the offerings are made, it means the Chayan or the Shayan. The Chayan rituals consisted in collecting the sacred ashes as well as the sacrifices after the yajna and the piling them up in a certain place apparently fenced with the walls of the stone, bricks, or sometimes even of the mud. So these are artistic or the artistic representation of this particular kind of this stupa. You can see here, this is that emergence of this. This is the art you can find in this. So Yupa as a memoroid were also erected near the Chaitya Yagya. And the reason behind this is to keep the things related to the Yagya sacred from the villagers or the animals. So the Chaitya Yagya for tying the sacrificial animals that is being mentioned in the ancient text. And even in our epics like the Mahabharata, the Chaitya Yupa Stan Kita has been mentioned. So it says the Bhimsen Dharmato Raj Savata Parikshite. So these kind of narrations you will find in our epic text. So the tradition of the stupa with the pillar may be inspired by the Yagya Chaitya as well as the Yupa in our ancient text which has been mentioned. So it may be regarded as the origin as well as the commencement of the Chaitya cult of the stupa. So another derivation of the word Chaitya is from the Chiti or the Chita. And the Chita we know. So many type of the fire altars or the Chiti or the Shiti have been mentioned in the Vedic text like the Rath Chakra Chiti, Drona Chiti, Sayan Chiti, Kanak Chiti, Kurma Chitti, Samsan Chitti. So all these terms, they are mentioned in the Vedic text. So these can be interpreted as the funeral pile or the Agni. And sometimes the Chitta is extended or Chitta is considered to be the Samshan that we know. And the Chitta or the Chitya is extensively used in the Samhitas as well as the Brahmanas. But for the first time, Chaitya is the meaning of the Yagsthan is occurred in the Ashwalanya Griha Sutra, the text which is probably of the before the 6th century BC, and Arthasastra, written by the Kautilya. It also refers to the word this word Chittisthan as a burial ground. Frequently, it has been mentioned in the Chaitanya, this Kautilya's Arthashastra about this particular term. And the Pitramed Sukta mentions that after the cremation of the dead, on the third day or any odd day, the collection of the bones were done. On the full moon day or on new moon day, the Sraddha ceremony was done, and the remains of the dead were entombed in a mud chaitya, that is the piling of the chiti, that is the lowest, that is known as the lowest chiti, and as a memorial, as a wooden pillar was also installed over the chaitya. So this tradition of burying the remains of the dead later on, the cremation might have inspired the building of the Buddhist stupa in the this particular Buddhist tradition. Satpat Brahman mentions of the raising of the mound on the burial ground after the cremation, and the burial mound of the Devata should be the square in shape. This is mentioned in the Satpat Brahman. And in the Jain as well as the Brahminical text, in some places, stupa is termed as the Chaitya, which I have already discussed about this one. So in the Vedic, post-Vedic epics, Jain and Buddhist literature, all of these texts refer to the existence of the Chaitya bricks. So these were mostly treated as the sacred places, but were not necessarily associated with the burials. We have to keep this thing in mind. So it is doubtful if any stupas were erected during the lifetime of the Buddha. So, since he had declared that it was inappropriate to erect a stupa to enshrine his bodily remains while he was still alive, so, however, the legend says that Buddha gave a few strands of his hair to the merchants, that is Tapassu and Vallik. That story we know about that one, who had offered him the first meal after the enlightenment at Bodh Gaya. That we know. And they were said to have erected a stupa over the hair relic so as to venerate them. So Burmese tradition that claims that these hair relics they are enshrined in the this Swedagon stupa at Yangon or the Rangoon that we know. So though it is generally believed that the merchants they hailed from the ancient Kaling region. So they went there, and in Burma, the stupa were erected over the hairs of Lord Buddha. So after the demise of the Lord Buddha and the cremation at the Kushinagar, and later the corporal relics that were distributed among the 8 Mahajanpadas, that I will be telling about all those things. So I was talking about this emergence of this pre-Buddhist this structure, which was prevalent in our or the mentioned in our ancient texts. So there are some differences between this Vedic city as well as the Buddhist stupa. So what are all these differences? The Vedic cities they were shorter than the Buddhist stupa. When we find the difference, and the Vedic city is devoid of the base, whereas the Buddhist stupas they were erected on the Vedi or the base. And as per the Satpat Brahman, we can see here in the text which is mentioned that the early Buddhist stupa is made up of this mud, whereas the Vedic city is made up of the bricks. So this is the difference between these two. One, and the circumambulation of the Samsan city is in anti-clockwise, as in the Buddhist stupa. Always the circumambulation is done in the clockwise direction because Samsan city is considered as the unholy palace, whereas in Buddhist stupa it is a holy palace. That is why you will see the different monks they are just circumambulating this stupa in a clockwise direction. Always you will find in a stupa. So talking about the existence of this evolution of the stupa in the textual references, we have the different kind of the Vedic literature, this Buddhist literature after the Vedic text. Basically we have the Pali canon, that is the Mahapanirvan Sutta, as well as the Jatak stories like the Mahakapi Jatak, Sujata Jatak, Bahya Sutta Jatak, and many other Jatakas, which tells us about the evidence of or the narrations about the mention about the stupa in the Buddhist literature. And these structures have also been mentioned about the Chinese pilgrims like the Xunjiang, as well as the other who visited India in different time interval. Beside this, we also have the epigraphic evidence of the stupa constructed before the Lord Buddha, and we know about the inscription on one of the pillar edict, which says that the 14 years after the coronation, King Priyadarshi, that is the Lord, this King Ashok, and he is considered to be, he is mentioned as the beloved of the god in inscriptions, and he enlarged the stupa, enshrining the relics of the 24th Buddha, that is the Kanak Mudi Buddha, to double its size. And 20 years after his coronation, he visited that particular spot in person again, and he offered the worship at this place, and he caused this stone pillar to be erected, that we know about this particular this pillar dict. And here this that inscription which is mentioned about the erection of this stupa. And beside this, we also find the stupa as be depicted in the Tibetan version of the lost Sanskrit originals, which have been found in the Kangyur, this testament. So when we talk about the mention of this stupa as architecture or the stupa as a structure in the Buddhist text, so there are four categories of the Vinay Sutra. That is the Vinay Vastu, that is the Vinay Vibhang, as well as the Vinay Chudrak, Vastu, as well as the Vinay Uttarang Granth. So I will be telling in detail about the erection or the construction of the stupa as per the textual reference in these texts. So that these two texts, particularly the Vinay Chudrak Vastu as well as the Vinay Uttar Granth, they gives the valuable information about the architecture of the Buddhist stupa. Both these texts are the Tibetan version of the lost Sanskrit original, which has been found in this Kangyur testament. So, according to the Mahaparinirvana Sutta of the Digha Nikaya, and here as well as the Vinay Shudrak Vastu in the Tibetan version, at one time Anand asked the Buddha how to deal with the Tathagat body after his demise. Though this is a dialogue between the Lord Buddha as well as this his most loved this pupil, his name was Anand. So Buddha replied, this would be the task of the learned Kshatriyas, learned Brahmanas, as well as the learned householder. So he answers Ananda. Anand asked, after the demise of the Tathagat or the any monk, what should we do? So the Lord Buddha replies, this is the work of the Kshatriya, the Brahmanas, as well as the householders. From this, the Buddha meant that this was not the concern of the order of the monks, nuns, as well as the Sangh, but of the laity, that was the common man. They were responsible for erecting the stupa for these people. So when Ananda asked how to perform the funeral rites of the Buddha after his demise, the Buddha replies that they should be performed according to the funeral rites of a Chakravarti or the ruler of a Chakra by a custom due to an emperor. So he says that this my body or I should be just cremated like a Chakravarti king. So this Lord further concludes that Lord Buddha, he says that the bones should be deposited in a golden urn, a stupa of his physical body at the crossing of the four main roads built along with the umbrellas, banners, as well as the flags. So this was the narration about the erection of the stupa for him to the Ananda. According to the Tibetan version of the Vinay Chudrak Vastu of the Mool Sarvasti Vadin text, Chund, he was a disciple of Sariputra, that we know, and he collected the corporal remains or the relics of the Sariputra, basically the begging bowl, and he handed them to the Anand. Anath Pindak, that we know he was a rich merchant, and he asked Anand to hand over the relics as well as the belongings to the Sariputra. And with the Buddha's order, Anand gave all these relics as well as the other utensils to the Anath Pindak, and then he constructed a stupa over that one. Anath Pindak palaces, he placed the relics, arm balls, as well as the robes on a prominent place of his house to enable people to come and pay their homage. And once he had to lock the house and go out, and the people who had to come pay homage got annoyed. So Anath Pindak placed the matter before the Buddha, whom he asked allow him to build a stupa for the venerable Sariputra. So Buddha gave his consent, and he gives the following instruction to build a stupa. So what are these instructions? Number one, in the due subsequent order, at first four terraces the stupa should be built. It was this narration was given by Lord Buddha to Anand. Second one, the receptacle for the pot are to be made. So where the pot was to be kept, that has to be made. And the pot, the vessel, the pole, the umbrella canopy, from 1 to the 13 umbrella canopies, they has to be made or they have to be constructed. And Buddha says about the different number of these superimposed umbrella canopies to be constructed. And the stupa for the Tathagat should be 13 umbrella canopies. That is the Kshatriyasti. I'm talking about the emergence of the Kshatriyasti in the Buddhist architecture. And he says that for me or for the Tathagat, the 13 superimposed umbrella canopies to be constructed. For the stupa of the Arhat or the other monks, they have the four umbrella canopies. Those who do not return with the three, that is the Angamin, this Arhat or this monks, for them the three, and for Egomin or the other Arhat, for the two umbrella canopies should be constructed. So when Lord Buddha was asked that in which place Sariputra stupa should be constructed, he said that it should be built in accordance with the rank or the order of the seat of the this both Basariputra as well as the Mahamogdalayan, which occupied a prominent place in the Sangh that we know in relation to the seat of the Tathagat. So the stupa of the other elder members or the other monks of this particular the Sangh are to be arranged in due order of their rank. So this was the instruction given by Tathagat to Anand. So thus these descriptions, they illustrate the main structure for the Buddhist stupa, including the structural distinction in different classes of the Buddhist saints. And each disc of the umbrella has its own significance that we know. The first disc, when we talk about the different discs in the Buddhist architecture, so the first disc or the umbrella, which Yasti, it represents the mystical power to know the ability to perceive what is the position and what is not to be positioned for the preaching as well as the activity of the Buddha or the activity of the Sangh. So this was the first prescription. The second one, the second disc, it represented the mystical power to know, the ability to perceive that everybody is responsible for his own karma. That we know about the four noble truths of the Buddhism, that we, and as well as this the theory of the dependent origination, that is the Dwadas Nidan, all we know in the Buddhism. So the third disc, according to Lord Buddha, it represents the mystical power to know the ability to perceive all the meditation, liberation, concentration, as well as the union with the superior spheres. And the fourth disc, it represented the mystical powers to know the ability to perceive the superior as well as the low moral fallacies of the people of the Sangh. And the fifth disc of this particular Chatrayasti, it represents the mystical power to know the ability to perceive the various inclination towards the worldly affairs. And the sixth disc represents the mystical power to know the ability to perceive the different spheres of the existence. And the seventh represents the mystical power to know the ability to perceive the way one should lead to his life. And the eighth disc of this umbrella represents the mystical power to know the ability to remember the previous existence, that is the previous life of a person. And the ninth disc, that represents the mystical power to know the ability to perceive the time of the death as well as the rebirth. And the 10th disc represented the mystical power consisting of destroying the sinful forces which one person has committed. And the 11th, 12th, as well as the 13th disc of the umbrella represent the three supports of the awareness useful to the Buddha. So it was probably during the reign of the Ashoka that the royal umbrella first became associated with the stupa in India after he made Buddhism a state religion that we know. So all these things have been mentioned in this particular text of the Vinay Sutra. And now the next text is the Vinay Uttarang Granth, which I told you that these two texts, Vinay Uttarang Granth as well as the Vinay Chudrak Vastu, these texts they tell in detail about the stupa architecture. So when we talk about the Vinay Uttarang Uttara Granth, this particular text tells us about the tradition of the construction of the stupa of the Buddha's hair as well as the nails. So there is a long list of the additional structural components as well as the ornamental parts which are slowly added to the stupa constructed over the Buddha's relic, Buddha's hair as well as the nails by the Anath Pindak during his lifetime. So these all accounts have been mentioned in the sutra, that is with the Buddha's permission. Anath Pindak, first of all, he washes the stupa built over the hair and the nails of the Lord Buddha to make it look attractive, but it was not good at that time. Later, Anath Pindak realized that this stupa did not look nice in evening due to the lack of the illumination. So he requested Lord Buddha to allow him to offer a circle of butter lamp, and the installation of the lamp were treated in different ways by putting the lamps in the upper part of the stupa, which tarnished the white color of the stupa to dropping oils, as well as the lamps were placed in the lower part of the lamps. Similar problems arose with the regard to the cattle that polluted the area around the stupa by strewing their dung. So, in Buddha's concern, so all these problems they were arose during the time of the life of the Buddha. So, in Buddha's concern, the railings were erected all around the stupa as well as the gateway toranas were added to it. So, these were the reasons for the emergence of the railings as well as the toran by the Anath Pindak during the time of Lord Buddha. So there is another text that is known as Bimalos Nisa text. This is a Tibetan text or tantric text of this. This basically text tells us about the construction of the stupa. It tells us that stupas would be erected over the corporal relics of the Lord Buddha on a hill or a plain or a valley, and it should avoid asymmetry. So this particular text in particular points the various structural components of the stupa and their proportions to be kept in mind during the construction. At the end of the text, it talks about, in this particular text, it talks about that the corpus to be kept to the structural component of the stupa. And next text, that is the Chaitya Vibhang Sutra. This text is also a Tibetan text that is also mentioning about the construction of the different components of the stupa architecture. And the text mentions about the symbolical meaning of the main structure of the stupa in order of their sequences with the essence of the Tathaga's Dharmakaya. So the essence are the four closed mindfulness, the four perfect abandonments, the four miracle powers, the five faculties, the five forces, seven factors of the enlightenment, the eightfold noble path that we know as Tangic Mark, the 10 types of the consciousness, and the 10 mystical powers, the three absolute mindfulness, and the great companion that is connected with the structure of the stupa by the reflected image of these sets. They are mentioned, and this is called as the reflected image of the Dharmakaya. So all these things are mentioned in the Chaitya Vibhanga Sutra, which tells us about the while constructing the stupa, all these parameters or all these things should be kept in mind. So now coming to the, so you can see here, uh, I was talking about the stupa as being depicted in the Tibetan version of this lost Sanskrit originals, which has been found in the Kangyu Testament. So main sources I told you about, these are the Vinay Pitak, Vinay Vastu, Vinay Vibhang, and these all texts which I have talked in detail. And Anath Pindak built a stupa during the life of time of the Buddha. I have already narrated all these things. So Buddha tells Anand that one should construct the gradual flights of the four steps, then a base support or a kung upon his base or the stupa dome, a harmika, a yasti, and up to 13 umbrellas should be made, and the rain block should be placed at the top of the stupa, which I have already mentioned. So this is mentioned in the art also. This is reflected in the artistic representation also about this one. So coming to the symbolism of the stupa. So when we talk about the stupa symbolism, so we know that stupa is one of the ancient symbol of the Buddha because of its association with the Buddha himself and is honored as such, the stupa. And this devotion is expressed in the Mahavastu text, and it is mentioned in that text that he who having turned his thought to the enlightenment for the sake of the all living things salutes the top of the savior of the world becomes everywhere in his life as the fares on the way of enlightenment, mindfulness, thoughtfulness, virtuous, and the assured. So this is the symbolism associated with this stupa, and the stupa symbolizes Buddha enlightened mind and his teaching, and a few stupas were built to enshrine the Buddhist scriptures. And furthermore, the architectural elements of a stupa are symbolic of the doctrines as well as the the tradition of the Buddhist faith. And in some of the Theravada text or in Theravada tradition, the parts of the stupa they represent the division of the noble eightfold path, that is the ethical conduct, concentration, wisdom, as well as the nirvana. And the Buddhist stupa that we know, I will be talking about the typology now. This is the change in the concept of the stupa here. Here this Buddhists they conceived or they considered this stupa as the object of the supreme veneration as well as the sanctity and developed it along their own lines to such an extent that it was converted from simple mound of earth to a this structure of the great architectural magnificence, and it became the chief emblem of the Buddhist faith that we know. This is the depiction on the Sanchi Torana, architrave of the Sanchi Toran. You can see here. So now coming to the kinds of the stupa, the Buddhist stupa, they are of the three kinds. That is the Saririk stupa, which was raised over the relic of the Buddha or the Arhat, and it contains the relics of the Buddha. And this is the stupa of this Amravati. This is the replica, not the original one. The existence of this kind of stupa we can archaeologically find at the several places like Sanchi, Takshashila, Vaishali, Piprava, Bhattiprolu, Nagarjunikonda, Amravati, and the next category of this stupa, that is the Parbhogic stupa, which was erected on the auspicious materials which was used by the Buddha or his follower or the monk. And here, these kind of stupa are the stupa. Basically, the objects used were the basically the rope, balls, or the walking stick. And Fayan as well as the Wensang, these the Chinese travelers, they have reported the stupas enshrining these relics, but archaeologically it has not been proved till now. And the third category of the stupa is the Udesic stupa, and they were erected for the worshipping, and they contained no relics or to enshrine the scriptures, and they were planned at a places having the religious importance for its followers. For example, you can see here the famous Dhamek stupa of Sarnath in Uttar Pradesh, and here Udesic stupa, they were erected just for worshipping, and the stupa raised by Ashoka in the Lumini garden visited by the emperor on his 12th regnal year is which was, he was accompanied by his teacher Upgupta also. So the stupa which was present there that also belong to this category of this Udesic stupa. And here the another stupa or the last category you can see here is the stupa or votive stupa. And here in this stupa you will find basically they are monolithic in nature, and if they are erected over the fulfillment of some vow or some fulfillment of some desire, that these kind of stupa are being erected. And in Vajrayan tradition they also attribute about the different components of the stupa of the five elements. For example, the earth, water, fire, earth as well, air as well as space, And these elements, they represent the different stages in the transformation of the psycho-spiritual energy in the path of the enlightenment. Hence, being an object for the devotion, the stupa, they became an instrument of the meditative visualization. So these all are the symbolism associated with this. These are the type of stupa which I've already talked about. So the stupa erected over the remains of the Sakyamuni Buddha. So how it was erected after his Mahaparinirvan. So you can see here, this is the famous panel housed in the Indian Museum, Kolkata, of his Mahaparinirvan. So after his demise, the Mallas of the Kushinagar, they wrapped the body in a new cloth, and then in the cotton cloth or the cotton wool, and the process was repeated into 500 times. So the 500 layers of the new cloth as well as the cotton wool was finally, it was placed in a oil vessel of the iron. Then a funeral pile was prepared and all sorts of the perfumes were kept inside. So this is mentioned in the Mahapanirvan Sutta of the Buddhist tradition. So these mallas, they wrap the body of the king of the kings, that is Lord Buddha, Anand, in a new cloth, and when that was being done, they wrapped in a corded cotton wool, and afterwards they wrap in a new cloth, and so on till they have wrapped the body in 500 successive layers of the both kinds. So you can see here, this is the representation in the art how this was being wrapped 500 times, and you can see here how his body is being, and this is the scene showing the fire, the flame, or his burn. So this was the scene or the cremation of Lord Buddha. So his body was carried away by the Devatas, the Malla chief, with a mass procession with performing dance, song, and music to the Mukut Bandhan, situated on east side of the city, and was graciously cremated there. So this is the scene or the procession scene after the demise of Lord Buddha. And the Mallas of this Kushinagar, they kept this body, the relics of the Buddha, in their possession at a this place for a week. And soon after this news was spread all over and attracted the attention of so many people there. And we know that there was a huge war for the distribution of this relic of Lord Buddha. And in this war, so many people were involved. Ajasatru of the Magad, Lichavis of the Vaishali, Sakyas of Kapilvastu, Buliyas of Alakappa, Koliyas of Ramgram, Brahmanas of the Vedathi Dweep, and the Mallas of the Pava, and all of them claimed for the possession of the relics of Lord Buddha. So this is mentioned in detail in the Mahaparinirvana Sutta. And so you can see here the war scene on the this Toran of the Sachi also of this particular incident. So this is a scene of the war showing the scene of the war for the relics of Lord Buddha. So a Brahman from the Mathura region, his name was Dron. He was called upon and he divided this relic into 8 different parts, and on these relic remains the stupas were built, and these were relics were inside or kept in a jar in which the relics were kept before their division. And the Maurya of the Piplivan, they erected a stupa on the charcoal remains which was collected by them from the site of the Buddha cremation, because he was not able to get the relic in that one. So this is the division of this relic by this saint or the Rishi Drone of Mathura, and he is dividing these particular relics into 8 parts. So this was the 8 equal division of the Buddha's relic being done by the Brahman Drone, and this is being taken by Ajasatru in this position. You can see here. This is the scene showing at the railings of the Bharut here. A royal procession is being illustrated on the end pillar of the Vedika, and the major figure here carries an elephant gold cylindrical box you can see here at the top, which held the relics to be buried within the stupa. So already I have talked about the conversation between Anand and the Lord Buddha about who are the man, they are who are the worthy for the construction of the stupa. So the Lord Buddha he has answered the fully enlightened one, that is the Buddha, that is Tathagat. Awakened one, that is the Pratyek Buddha, the true healer of the Tathagat, that is the Tathagat Sevak, as well as the king of the kings or the Chakravarti. So all these people, they are worthy for the construction of the stupa for them. So now coming to the evolution of the stupa as seen from the archaeological remains of the pre-Mauryan Buddhist art. So we have to come here. Example here is the Vaishali, that was the ancient center of the powerful Lichavi that we know, and the Gautam Buddha is said to have visited this particular place many times during his lifetime. So this is the stupa of at Vaishali, or which is known as Kolua also. It is in modern Bihar. So this is the mud stupa you can see here. This is the mud stupa constructed here. It is in one of these visits when Lord Buddha visited there at this particular place of Vaishali. And we know that the famous incidents of the offering of the honey by the monkeys there to the Sakyamuni in a bowl or a pot. And this particular incident is being mentioned among the great 8 events or the miracles of the Lord Buddha, which happened during the lifetime of Lord Buddha. So this was the place, the Vaishali was the place here that the Lord Buddha announced his approaching Nirvana, and this is the place. And after his Nirvana, the Lichvis, they erected a stupa over their share for the remains of the Buddha, and that is that particular stupa which you can see. Then we have amongst all the religious monuments of the world, the stupa, which has been constructed after the demise of, or the enlightenment of Lord Buddha, had the largest uninterrupted historical development spanning more than 3 millennium now. And in India, almost all the early structural stupas, which are in ruins, most of them were destroyed in due course of time by the weather as well as the treasure hunters, or have lost its original shape due to the subsequent renovations. And for instance, when we talk about the present form of the great stupa of Sanchi, is after the renovation done in the 2nd century BC during the Sunga period, but within its core are the remains of the another stupa which was built more than 100 years before. That is during the time of the King Ashok. And similar instances we can find in the stupa of Takshila as well as Nagarjunakonda, making it difficult to describe the shape of the earliest stupa. And for this, we have to rely upon the structural representation of them, of the stupa, in order to form a correct idea about the appearance of this particular stupa at that particular time. And these stupa, which I told you about, that these symbolize the sanctification as well as the stability of the Tathagat, and the signs of the sanctification. They were the addition of a tuft of the hair that represent the supreme power. Stability was shown by the stump or the wooden shaft as a axial play this pillar in the center of the monument or the center of the this particular stupa. And Sir John Irwin, he has emphasized that the primary component of every stupa had been an axial pillar of the wood, and the wooden shaft in the center of the stupa was found at Vaishali, Bihar, and here it was recorded in the excavation in the 1800 C. And after the 1st century, the stupa architecture underwent a gradual transformation or the change, and the height of this particular stupa was also increased. Base was also increased, enlarged, and the dome which rested on the this drum, they demarcated the different terraces, which is known as the Medhi in the Dibyavadan text, and in the Ceylon or in Sri Lanka, a Pali word for this is the place for the depositing the flowers. This is mentioned in the Sri Lankan text, and the relics they were kept in the hollow space in the interior of dome of the stupa, and the relic casket is generally made up of the precious metal in the shape of a miniature stupa, and the upper part is made up of this square structure which is known as the hermica, and it bears the umbrella about which I have already told you in detail. And the term Harmika is not available in the Mahavans text. We should keep all these things in mind. And this part of the stupa is called the Chaturasya Saya, which means the quadrangular enclosure. And in Ceylon or Sri Lanka, it is also called Devata Kotwa, and this was the citadel of the god. This is known as, that is why whenever you go to Sri Lanka, you will find a huge large this size of the stupa they are built there. And the stupa that comprising of these parts of the drum or the dome or the upper part, that is the harmika, they were generally surrounded by the railing also. And this space was used by the devotees for doing the pradakshina, a right of that is the right of the worship in the Buddhism. And the Pradakshina path, that is the circumambulatory path of the stupa, was open, paved with the stone panels, and they beared sometimes the votive inscriptions also. In the Mahavans text, this railing is called the Pad Vedika, railing at the foot, or this ground railing is around the stupa. And the Vedika, it reminds of the ancient wooden railing, which is made up of the plinth, that is the alamban, that is the, then one is the upright, that is the stump, and then suchi. So all these are the fitted, followed by a coping stone, that is the usnish. And according to Kumaraswamy, this part of the Vedika is called this usnish, and it is known as, also known as the turban. And it is due to the relationship of the stupa, which encircles like a turban or a ribbon encircles the head of a person who is wearing it. So it is generally cut by one or the four doorways, and the toranas, they are built up to two large pillars linked by two or three lintels. And generally the bigger stupas, they were constructed of the brick, and the small ones were made up of this soapstone, sometimes with the blue stone, and sometimes with the mud also. So the bigger ones, they were plastered, which is mentioned in the text. For example, in the Mahavastu, it is mentioned that the stupa was built too big, not too small. It was covered with the clay, that is mritika. It was covered sometime with the stako, that is the suddha. And the same word is found in the Mahavans. And the wood was also used in construction, that we know in earlier stupas, we find the mention of the wood as a yasti for this construction of the stupa. And it is thus that a story from the Sutra Arankar mentions that tree which was used for a beam for supporting a stupa. This is mentioned in the text also. So I was talking about the archaeological remains or the evidences for the construction of the stupa. So here we can find here the Piprapa stupa. You can see in the slide. So this is the relic casket of the Piprapa stupa, which was unearthed in the excavation by W.C. Pepe. His excavation, you can see here, all these were the antiquities which were unearthed from the excavation of the stupa of Piprava. Then we have the stump of the wood or the pillar found in the center of the this mount at this Loria Nandangarh in the Western Paran district of Bihar. And so now, coming to the development of the stupa and its part, so I have already talked in detail about the development of its different parts. Coming to the summary of this one, the earliest stupa which we see in the carvings, basically at the Barut railings as well as the Sachi, and we can see here the pre-Buddhist period in also they existed. They were not built or decorated; they were the simple one. And the stupa, when it was built by the Ashok, they were simple structure built of the brick as well as the plaster, and surrounded by a wooden rail with the open gateways facing the all the four cardinal directions. And later on, all other devices were added in this one. So coming to the last portion of my talk, that is the views of the scholars on the genesis of the stupa. One of the most important scholar is an art. He is of the opinion that stupa is a stone representation of the round hut of a early fire worshippers, and the harmika imitates altar of the fire. I have talked about the harmika. And E.B. Hebel, he is of the opinion that this stupa is derived from the Aryan chieftain's hut, Similarly, Stella Krameris, another great art historian, is of the opinion that the stupa architecture is the resultant of the combination of the Vedic culture and the cane of the ancient times. And S.K. Saraswati is of the opinion that this hemispherical structure emerged out of the earthen funeral mound, that is the samshan, under which, according to the Vedic rituals, the ashes of the dead they were buried. And A.C. Banerjee, he is of the opinion that the round form of the Asuri burial mound gave rise to or gave birth to the round stupa structure. Vincent Smith is of the opinion that stupa is derived from the curved roof of the bamboos built over a primitive circular hut shrine. And M.B. Krishna Rao, he is of the opinion that the crude megalithic structures, dolmens, and the hero shrines, essentially tumular one, are basically the Buddhist structure of the south, which developed from all these structures. So it seems that the stupa architecture developed along the time span and through the traditions, though this tradition can be traced from the proto-historic time to the megalithic period and then Vedic period, it took it developed shape gradually, and that we have seen in the mention of in various Vedic literature or the texts. So the Vedic circular burial served as a prototype of the Buddhist stupa. So coming to the sum up or the summary, the erection of the stupa is a pre-Buddhist tradition. As per the Rice Davis has said that the tombs were not necessarily Buddhist monuments, but in fact they were pre-Buddhist in nature, and indeed only a slight modification of a worldwide custom took place in the evolution of this particular stupa architecture. And the Buddhists, they made stupa a popular as well as a sacred structure during their tenure or the time period. And the pattern of the making memorial burials has a long history from proto-historic period in Indian context. And in the process of its evolution, various additions, subtractions were made in the stupa architecture, which I have dealt in brief about the different components of this stupa architecture. And for example, we can see in the early phase, the depiction of the altar was a prominent feature of the Hermica, but it was discarded later on. So you can see here in the artistic representation about this one particular stupa. The parasol or this yasti was not an important feature of the early stupa, but yup, as evident in the stupa of the Lodyanandargarh as well as Piprava, was an essential feature of the stupa architecture. And with the passage of the time, Vedika, Harmika, Chhatra, Toran, Upper Vedika, and the other architectural members, they were added to it. And in the early phase, only the Saririk stupa they were erected, but later on the Parbhogik, Uddeshik, as well as the Votiv stupa were also constructed as a devotional faith on Buddhism increased among the masses. So all kind of stupa, whether it is a relic stupa, Parbhogik or the Uddeshik, it became a symbol of purity as well as the means of salvation or the nirvana. And at last, but not the least, the stupa became the center of the Buddhist art, which flourished in the Sunga period. And so the earliest Buddhist art we can see they developed at the places like Sanchi, Bharut, Bodh Gaya, Sarnath, Kaushambi, Amravati, Pauni, and many other places. So thank you very much for your patience listening. If you have any query, you can just ask me.
Uh, Thank you very much, sir. It was indeed a wonderful, very, very informative and very enlightening lecture because we have understood the concept, how the concept and the idea of a stupa developed in Indian context, and not only the Indian context, but in the context of all the Asian countries. So, thank you very much, sir, for the wonderful presentation. With your permission, sir, can I take up a few questions?
Yeah, yeah, sure.
Yes, sir. First of all, I am asking a question on behalf of all the beginners who have watched this lecture. What is the difference between Chaitya, Vihar, and Stupa?
As you see, The Chaitya basically is a place of worship in the Buddhist tradition, and the Bihar was basically a residential place for the monks, basically which we call in English as a monastery. So that is the Bihar, and the stupa. I have told in detail about the meaning of the stupa. It represented the basically in the Hindu tradition. It represents the Mahaparinirvan of Lord Buddha. So the stupa means the veneration or the nirvan or the Mahaparinirvan of Lord Buddha. Bihar means a dwelling place for the monks, and this particular this Chaitya means the place of worship for the monks. It may be in the
Thank,
form of the stupa or maybe in the form of any other structure.
thank you so much, sir. Then we have a question by Mrs. Chaya Momaya. Are there 24 Buddhas like 24 Tirthankars in Jainism? So, because one
So
of
they
the
are no, they are quite different from this 24 Buddhas of this 24 Tirthankara. They are quite different, and we have for that we have to understand about the concept of the Bodhisattva, the Buddha. Buddha is the last one that we know. The Bodhisattva, like this Padmapani and other one, they are in the process of making the Buddha. They have not become the full Buddha. When they attain the Buddhahood, then they become this particular Buddha. So this is quite different that one, and this we have the Manusi Buddha also, which we have you have asked about that one. That is the 24 Buddhas, and it is different from the this Tirthankaras of the Jain tradition of pantheon.
thank you very much, sir. Then we have a question by Korobi Mitraji. Where from the sculpture of cremation scene is found?
This
The
is
one which.
from this is Sachi, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Sir, I have two more questions actually.
Yeah.
Why is circumambulation such an integral part of several of the Indian religions? And when and how did this concept evolve? That is my first question.
Yeah.
And
So
the
this,
second,
yeah.
yes, sir, you can answer that, and then
Yeah,
I'll
I
take
will
on.
answer the first one. Otherwise, I will just forget. You know that
Yes,
we, whenever we go to any temple, in our this Indian temple also, we have the concept of this Sandhara as well as the Nirandara temple. Sandhara means the temple which has the circumambulatory path where we can circumambulate, and it is always done in the right side direction, in the clockwise direction, because there is a this concept in Indian tradition that right is considered to be the auspicious one, and because of this movement of the earth, when we talk it scientifically, that is along with the axis of this movement of the earth, that is we are getting the more powerful or more energy when we are doing the circumambulation of this particular temple or our this in Garbhagriha in the DT. So that is why that is the main concept behind this one. For this one, next question.
thank you, sir. This is also my question. Can structural temples be considered as an evolved variation of the stupa architecture, or are those two concepts completely different?
They are completely different one when we talk about the structural temples, because they have the other components. In stupa I told you the different components. It was with the base, drum, harmika, then railings, yeah, these are other yastis, all these things. But in structural temples you will find the other components when you are talking about, so it is quite different one.
Thank you, sir. Then there is another question by Korobiji. During pre-Buddhist period, were the stupas built on earthly remains of some other important persons?
Definitely, it was mentioned because I have already given you the inscriptional evidence of the Kanak Muni, which was before, because you see that before the birth of Lord Buddha, this Kanak Muni was born, and on his body remains for this structure was just this erected there. Although we could not find the evidence in the archaeological evidence for that one, but there we find the evidence of the pillar where it is mentioned about that one. During the reign of King Ashok, he visited that particular place and he enlarged the size of that particular. And also we have another examples also for this one. So we have definitely the evidence of this particular structure of the stupa architecture prior to the birth of Lord Buddha.
Thank you, sir. There is another question by Mrs. Chaya Momaya. Are any such depictions of funeral procession found on any sculptural panels of Jain temples of Jain Tirthankars,
So
which are?
I will not be able to particularly tell about this particular answer because I haven't worked on that direction. So I will not be able to tell that one. Do we find that structural representation in the Jain tradition or the Jain temples or the structure? So if I find the answer, I will definitely let you know, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. Sudeep ji has asked, so very fascinating lecture. What is Asuri burial?
Sorry, Burial, you know that in the some remote tribal areas of Kalandi district of Orissa, we have the tribes like the Asur. So these people, when they erect their structures or the burials, they are just like the mound. So these are the Asuri burials. You
Thank you,
can
sir.
see in this in the many parts of the Koraput as well as the Kalandi district of Orissa, where the Asuras they are still living and practicing this kind of tradition.
Thank you, sir. Manuel Joseph sir has asked, would the earlier Manushi Buddhas and 548 lives go back to the Harappan period?
Sir, I will not be able to answer you this question, sir. I am not much about this one. I haven't read about this Manusi Buddha, and I will not be able to answer this one, sir. You are my senior, and I would like to learn it from you, sir.
Thank you very much, sir. I would also like to read out a few names, few comments. Dr. S.N. Upadhyay from Jaunpur has written very informative lecture, sir. Then, of course, Manuel Joseph sir has also written great going, and Korobi ji has written, thank you so much for this excellent lecture. So we had a wonderful time learning from you, sir. And I request if any of the viewers have any more questions, you can always post it in the comment section and we can get back the answers for you. But with this, we have come to the end of today's lecture. We are hoping to learn much more from you on this concept and about Buddhism. And we hope to have more lectures about this in the future, sir, in this series.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So I would now like to propose a vote of thanks on behalf of all the members of the History Enthusiast Association. I thank our today's resource person, Dr. Vinay Kumar, sir, for a very wonderful and very informative and excellent presentation. I also thank all the members, all the audience members who participated actively throughout the lecture and have patiently listened to it and benefited from it. We are going to have another lecture on Buddhism that is coming up on the 25th, and I have posted the poster here for you. It is on another very fascinating topic, Varna and Jati from the Buddhist perspective. It will be at 7 p.m. on 25th May, that is day after tomorrow. I request all the audience members to show the same enthusiasm and join us on that day. With this, we are signing off here. Have a great weekend ahead. Goodbye, and let us all walk on the path of the Buddha and let him lead us to light. Thank you all.